Here's the question that I received. We're told to construct and interpret a 95% prediction interval for the proceeds when x is 592, and we are given a regression line. Pause here so that you can go to Stat, Edit, put your x is in L1 and your y is in L2. So this is the formula to find the margin of error, and it's kind of gross, and we're going to find it in 3 different pieces. At least I'm going to find it in 3 different pieces, and then I'll put them together at the end. This is not the gospel truth of how you must complete this, but this is how I'm going to complete it in a, I don't know if I would say mindless, but I'm trying to give myself the least amount of times that I could type something incorrectly and screw everything up. So I'm going to do it in 3 pieces, and I'm also going to let the calculator do a lot of the dirty work, because as a stats person, then my job is not to add, subtract, multiply, divide, but to know what to do with numbers and where they go. Also, LinReg T interval is not as useful as you might think it would be, because it does give you an interval, but it's an interval for the slope. It's not an interval for the y's that we need. At 95% confidence, I'm going to evaluate inverse t at 0.975. Reference the graphic in the bottom left corner to see why. I'm going to figure out that point right there. So I'm going to go to second, vars, and I'm going to choose number 4 for inverse t. My area is going to be 0.975, because that's where the little purple mark is in the bottom left corner. The df, because I'm dealing with bivariate data, I need to say n-2 for this, so this would be 8. And there you have it. We're going to do the standard error 2 different ways. One of them is going to require less brain power and more button pushing, and that is when we go into stat tests. I go up to LinReg T interval. Now this is useful and problematic at the same time. We're going to say x and y are L1 and L2. My C level is 0.95 because they said so. We'll talk about the reg EQ in a second. We go to calculate, and your standard error is this S value right here, this 7,305.92308. That is the number that you're looking for. Now, why this could be a little deceptive is that you have an interval right there, but that's not the interval you're looking for. That's the interval for your slope, not for the y value, which is what the question is asking us for. Another thing that it could be useful for is stat tests. Go up to here. Is right here at the reg EQ. Let me delete that so I can show you where that comes from. If I go to vars and yvars and function, tell it to put that in y sub 1 or whatever function or whatever y I want, blah, 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 enter. I get all that same stuff. Yay, I found an S, that kind of thing. But also right here in my y equals, it stores my regression equation. The original problem gave us a regression equation, which kind of renders this unnecessary, but that is one of the useful things of that interval. But remember that the interval it gives you is not the interval of y, and it's just something useful for your slope. Greetings, it's me of the past. It's the version of me that you might have gotten in either an algebra class or a calculus class, but you can call up whatever stuff you have in your y equals, just like it's an f of x. Let me show you what I mean. Here's my regression equation. We're going to pass on that for a second. I'm going to type in something. So 2x plus 3, for example. Get back to my home screen. And you can call these things up. Vars, go 1 to the right, function. I put that stuff right there in y sub 2, and then open parentheses of, 4, something like that. And then this works just like f of 4. So 2 times 4 is 8, plus 3 is 11. That's what it's doing. So I'm going to use that the same way that I could call up, say, vars, yvars function and y sub 1. In this case, I'm going to pull up the 592. That's going to be useful information to me. I'm also going to, instead of calling an x, I'm going to call an L1 when I want to use it in my list menu so that I can use it repeatedly. But you can call up whatever function you have in there as long as it's typed into y equals. In this particular problem, we're given a regression equation, so I just showed you how to store it reg EQ, but I don't need to show you how to do that because you could just type it in there based on what was given in the original problem on the very first screen. The only thing we don't like about that other way is that I have to type in the number on my screen and I might make a mistake there. So a nerdier version of how we could do this is use our standard error formula that we learned last time. We're going to go into Edit, and I'm going to go to L3. What I'm going to do is find the deviation squared from y minus y hat, and that's going to be here. My y values are going to be in L2, minus my y hat values are going to be evaluating whatever my function is at the x's that are in my L1. I'm going to say it like this, vars, y vars. You can actually just type that out, you don't have to be this nerdy about it. And then instead of x, I don't have x per se, I have L1 values because I wanted to evaluate it a bunch of times. I'm going to close that a second time, square it, enter. I don't really care about the numbers that are on the screen because I'm just going to go to my home screen. I'm going to finish off my standard error situation here with a square root of fraction bar of, and I've already found all the individual deviations squared, so I'm going to go to stat. Nope, I'm going to go to second stat. Go to math. I want the sum of all that stuff I just put in L3. Close it. Over n minus 2. That would be 8. And there's the number that we're looking for, and I can call that number up whenever I need it as opposed to type it out. Now recall that stats is not really about can you add, subtract, multiply, and divide a whole bunch of times, but do you know where these numbers go? So I'm going to do this as mindlessly as I can and not type anything fresh if I can avoid it. So I'm going to start with, in this obnoxious radical, with 1 plus 1 over 10 plus, now the next part is an obnoxious fraction inside of an obnoxious radical. So obnoxious fraction calls for alpha y equals enter. My n is 10. Open. Now they said x naught, which would be whatever x they gave us in this problem. This one would be 592. And then minus. Now I want to be as mindless as possible. I need x bar, which would be the average of all my x values. So if I want an average, I'm going to go to second and stat to get to list menu over here, math, and then I want the mean. So I'm going to call number 3 of L1. Close it. And then I'm going to close it again. And I'm going to square that. Shout out to the person who reviewed my material, and the reason I wasn't getting it right was because I wasn't squaring that. And then down here, then I need 10 again. And then the next thing is the sum of all the x values squared. So second stat, math, the sum of the x values, that would be L1. And those are squared, close it. And then I'm going to close that again because I don't want the 10 to multiply by anything else. Minus, the next thing is going to be the sum of L1, and then we're going to square that. So I'm going to say second stat, math, sum of L1. We're going to close it, and then we're going to close, well, let's see, we're going to square right there. And hit enter. And now you have saved in the memory the 3 important parts of E, and we're about to call each of these up and multiply them together. I don't care if you use your standard error that you found in LinReg T interval and you wrote it down and you're going to type it out right now, or if you created the square root of the sum of all of the values of the square deviations divided by n minus 2. Either way, I'm going to use the nerdy version because that is what I like to do. But I don't care if you just type in the number. So I'm going to go grab this critical t value times, grab this number right here, my standard error, times, grab this number right here, hit enter, and I get this stuff. This is my margin of error. And finally, to get my interval, then I'm going to evaluate my y-hat. I am again going to be very lazy about this and not actually evaluate it, but tell it to evaluate it for me. I'm going to call y1 of 592 because that's what they said, minus, going to grab this number right here, and then I'm going to be even lazier. I'm going to go back up here and just switch this to plus. Don't forget to round these answers to the nearest whole number and then move your decimal place 6 times because millions. Bye.